Hello everyone and welcome to this video on API penetration testing. My name is Bakar Ahmed. I am an information security specialist at Perseus, which is a part of CSI, Constellation Softwares Incorporated. And today we are going to look at what are the areas of API penetration testing. So a brief introduction about myself first. Like I said, I am an information security consultant. I have been working in this field for almost 10 years now. I have various certifications after my MSc from Queen Mary University of London. For example, CEH, CPTE, ECIH, ISO 27001, and one of the most relevant certifications to this video is API Security Architect. I have been a speaker in other conferences as well, such as SANS Hackfest. I have been a visiting faculty. I have also been an instructor at Cybery, and I also try to share my knowledge through my YouTube channel known as Cyber Section. All right then. So moving on to the topic. So what are APIs? So API, as the name suggests, is application programming interface, or you may say that you interact with the website through the front end, and then there is a back end on the server on which a database might be running, and probably that particular server might be talking to another application, and the way these two applications interact with each other, or you can say how computer interacts with another computer over the internet, is API, or application interface, or application programming interface. Why is it necessary? So just as a protocol is necessary for internet communication, for browsers, for example, HTTP protocol or HTTPS protocol or TCP protocol, or in case you are having an audio call over the internet, then instead of TCP, you are communicating on UDP. So these are the different protocols for computer to understand what format of packetting needs to be done. So when one application talks to another application, for example, you might have a ride booking application in your cell phone, which might be taking the map of your city from another application, for example, Google Maps, and the way that information is transmitted to your ride booking application is through the use of APIs. So this was a brief introduction for those who do not completely understand what APIs are. So there are different types of APIs, or when it started, there were enhancements and improvements. For example, there was SOAP. One type of API is SOAP, which is Simple Object Access Protocol. As the name suggests, there are different objects. For example, what is the username? What are the information that, for example, what username? What is his account type? What, let's say, is his user ID, etc., etc. And it is just transmitted over markup, extensible markup language, or XML for short. So this was the earliest, or you can say earlier version of APIs. And then it further improved, and now one of the most commonly used types is the REST API, which is representational state transfer, and it offers some of the enhancements include some sort of security and other offerings as well. And REST API security can therefore prevent attacks. For example, malicious data an attacker tries to introduce into an API can be prevented. And it mostly sort of communicates on JSON instead of object XML in the case of SOAP. And then there are private, public, and partner APIs, and these are from a security point of view or privacy point of view. So as the name suggests, private APIs are only shared, or the communication is only between two internal two servers or applications that are within an internal network, not available on the public network. And then the other part obviously is public, which means that those APIs can be accessed through the public internet. And then there are APIs which you allow access to only certain partner applications. So there are some other, apart from SOAP and REST, there is GraphQL as well, which is another enhanced version. But we are, for the sake of testing, we are mainly going to focus on REST APIs. But GraphQL is another type, and a brief information on GraphQL. It's an open source API standard, and is popular with front-end developers because it puts them in control, and they're no longer restricted to fixed set of API methods, and can add or remove them according to their need. All right, so why should we secure APIs? So there have been a number of data breaches resulting in millions of losses, and some of the famous data breaches that we're going to discuss is the LinkedIn data breach, and a data of around, I think, 6 million users was compromised through the APIs, and it was being sold on the internet for somewhere around $5,000. Another data breach example is the Venmo API attack, in which data of various companies, included Venmo, Facebook, Google, was compromised through the API as well. So there was a research done, or you can say analytics performed by Salt Security, and they released the result of that research that 66% of the organization admit to having slowed the rollout of new applications into productions because of API security concerns, and nearly 91% experienced an API security incident last year. So that is huge, and considering the amount of problem that it can result in, it is really important to secure those APIs. When we say secure those APIs, what are we basically talking about? So we are talking about authentication and authorization mainly. So authentication basically is authenticating if you are a valid user, and authorization is what resources does even an authentic user has access to. So there might be some data that he has access to or should have access to, and there might be some data that he should not have access to. So this is managed by an API gateway, and what it is basically a API management tool for enterprise clients, and it uses a range of backend services, and they typically handle common tasks like user authentication, statistics, rate management, etc. So as we saw in the earlier slide, that there are backend systems through which APIs can communicate, but there is an API management system in between on the API gateway which handles these requests. And the better this API system is configured, the better it performs. So one of the ways in which the authentication is performed in the case of APIs is OAuth 1 and its latest version, which is OAuth 2. And as you can see in the slide, and we'll just briefly go through it because we are going to mainly focus on the issues and how to test them. So in OAuth 1, in the earlier version, what happened was that a user or consumer sent a request token, and the service provider redirected that user to the provider for authorization, whether he is authorized access to certain data. And then if he was a valid user with the authorization to that data, he was granted the authorization, redirected back to the application, and given the access token, and hence a connection was made. And the latest version of it has simplified things. So now it just redirects users to the provider directly for authorization, and the earlier two steps, as you can see, are which were to some extent unnecessary, have been omitted. All right, so these are the tools which we are going to look at in today's video. As some of you might have already, those who have been testing websites might be familiar with the tool which is Burp Suite, and those developers especially who work on APIs or QA must also be familiar with Postman. So these are the two main tools that we are going to look and see how we can use them for the penetration testing of APIs. Then there is a vulnerable API, you can say sort of a server that you can create known as WebP or WebPy, and then there is a URL known as Hexpert, which you can also use to test to perform the testing. And we are going to look into these tools mainly. So there are some other tools as well, for example, API Fuzz, etc. But we are going to discuss the basics first for those who are looking or to test their APIs, or those who are penetration testers and they have got a project to test the APIs. So we want to establish the basics first, and then they can perform the testing and then do further research and test other tools as well. So what are the OWASP API security top 10? We are going to discuss these in details and then look how we can test them. So one of them is broken object level authorization. So what is broken object level authorization? So also known as BOLA in short, is, as you can see in the diagram, if for example I am a user with a user ID or unique identifier as 01, and in the API, if I intercept the API and change that number from 1 to, let's say, 2, and if I am getting the results of the user with that particular number, that means that I have access to his resources.